So what does model and schema entail in MongoDB? In this video, I'm going to be explaining in details what a model and schema does for MongoDB. And we're going to go further to define a schema and create a model in MongoDB using mongoose. In our last lecture, we discussed how to connect to MongoDB using mongoose. And in this lecture, we're going to be discussing how to define a schema and create a model. So, but before we go ahead to do that, so let's take a look at this diagram to understand exactly what we'll be doing subsequently. So basically, what we will be doing is that we'll use mongoose to create a model. So this basically represents a record of a specific collection. So here with the user model just represents all the record that sits inside the user collection. So it is the user model that is used to create single instances of records within our collection, right? So this user model basically is just like what houses all of these, and it's instances of this user model that creates each single unique users in our collection. So one thing to remember about the user model is that they have a very important property called the schema, right? So the schema tells exactly what properties we expect each record, right, to have, and the data type of that property, right? So if you are going to have like several properties for a particular record, the schema is what tells us that will it be a string, will it be an array, will it be a number. If it's a name, it makes sense to be a string. If it's an ID, it makes sense to be a number. You get the point now. So that's just basically what the schema does for us. So now that I understand what we're going to be doing in this lecture, so let's go ahead to write some code. So let's create a new file in our SRC. So remember I told you that our SRC basically holds our models, right? So we're going to call this user.js. Once I'm done with that, we're going to type in a few code. And remember I said whenever we need mongoose, we're going to require it because every single file in these applications are working in isolation. So we're going to use const mongoose, right? We've installed mongoose and now we want to use it. We have to require it using the require statement, which is used for code sharing in another application. So once we are done with that, remember we said we want to create a schema. So now we're going to do const schema. Let's use that with a biggest. Schema is equal to mongoose.schema. So remember I said mongoose gives us makes it easier for us to work with our MongoDB. So we already have a method known as mongoose.schema, and this basically creates a schema for us. And then we are going to go ahead to define a user schema for our model. So user schema is equal to new schema. So remember whenever I want to create an instance of something, we always use new. So we are going to in an object, so this is basically where we put all the properties that we want. So we're just going to be working with something very basic. So we're just going to work with name, right? And it makes sense that the name becomes a string, right? So the string right here is just string on its own with a capital S. It's just is a reference to the base string object inside JavaScript. So this is special global variable that we have access to inside the language. So now we've created a schema, so we have to define a model. So and that model we use this user schema. So we are going to say const user is equal to mongoose.model right, brackets. So it takes two arguments. The first argument is the name of the collection, right? It's going to be user with a small letter u, and then the second argument is going to be the user schema that we've already defined above. So So there's something here, so I'm going to put my R so you can see that everything works now. Before I wrap up the lecture, I want to do one thing, which is make it possible for us to use this our user model in other files. So I'm just going to export this our user models. Model.export. Going to export our user model. So what we just did now is that subsequent files I will be creating will be requiring our user model, right, to create an instance of a user. So we don't want to come and start writing all this code again. So we just exported it so that when we need it in those files, we'll just import from user.js and we'll be able to have access to our user model here. In our next lecture, we'll be writing some tests to make sure that we can insert records into our database and make sure everything is working fine. So it's getting more interesting. So see you in the next video.